John and Matthew, The Long Way Home. It was early Saturday morning when John opened his eyes. For a few seconds, he stayed in bed and looked out of the window. The sun was just coming up and the sky was clear. There were a few small clouds, but the weather looked good. John smiled. Today was the day. He got out of bed, went to the kitchen, and made some coffee. Then he went upstairs to wake his son. "Matthew, it's time to get up." There was no answer. John opened the door. "Matthew?" The boy was still in bed. "Dad, what time is it?" 6:30. 6:30? "Yes." "It's Saturday." "I know." "So why are we getting up at 6:30? John laughed. "Because we have a mountain to climb." Matthew opened his eyes a little more. "Oh, right." John walked to the window. "Look outside. It's going to be a beautiful day." Matthew got out of bed and walked to the window. The sun was coming up behind the trees. "Wow," he said. "It does look good." "Come on, get dressed. We have a long day ahead of us." 20 minutes later, they were in the kitchen. John had made some sandwiches. He put them in 2 bags with some fruit and bottles of water. Matthew put his backpack on his back. "Is this everything?" "Food, water, a small first aid box, and a map." "A map?" "Yes." "But we have a phone." John smiled. "I know. But sometimes it's better to have a map, too." They left the house just after 7. The mountain was about an hour away by car. During the drive, Matthew looked out of the window. The road went through small towns, fields, and forests. The morning was quiet. There were not many cars. After some time, Matthew asked, "Dad?" "Yes?" "How high is the mountain?" "About 1,500 meters. "That sounds high." "It is." "Have you climbed it before?" "No." "So we don't know the way?" John laughed. "We have a map." Matthew looked at him. "Dad." "What?" "I hope you know what you're doing." John smiled. "I hope so too." They both laughed. When they arrived, they left the car near the beginning of the trail. John got out and looked around. The air was cool and fresh. Tall trees stood on both sides of the road. Somewhere in the forest, they could hear birds. Matthew took a deep breath. "I like this." "Me too," John said. They started walking. For the first hour, the trail was easy. They walked slowly and talked about many things. Matthew told his father about school. He talked about his friends, his teachers, and a game he wanted to play when they got home. John listened. Sometimes he asked questions, sometimes he laughed. After a while, Matthew looked at him. "Dad?" "Yes?" "Why don't we do things like this more often?" John thought for a moment. "I don't know." "You're always working." "I know." "And I'm always at school." "I know." Matthew looked at the trees. "Maybe we should do this more often." John smiled. "Maybe we should." They continued walking. The trail slowly became smaller. The trees were closer together, and the ground was covered with leaves and small stones. Then they heard water. "Do you hear that?" Matthew asked. "Yes." They walked a little farther and saw a river. It was not very wide, but the water was moving quickly. There was a small wooden bridge across it. Matthew walked closer. "Is that bridge safe?" John looked at it carefully. "I think so." "You think so?" John smiled. "We'll cross one at a time." John went first. The bridge moved a little under his feet. "It's okay," he said. Matthew followed him. When he reached the other side, he smiled. "That was easy." John laughed. "You were worried." "I wasn't worried." "You were." "Maybe a little." They walked on. A few minutes later, they saw a large rock beside the trail. It was different from the other rocks around it. It had red, brown, and gray parts. Matthew stopped. "Dad, look at this!" John came back. "What is it?" "I don't know." Matthew touched the rock. "Do you think it came from the mountain?" "Probably. Maybe it's very old." "Everything here is old." Matthew looked at the rock again. "Maybe it's a meteorite." John laughed. "You really think so?" "Maybe. Then we should take it home." Matthew tried to move the rock. It didn't move at all. "Okay," he said. "Maybe we should leave it here." They both laughed. The trail became harder after that. They had to walk up a long hill. Matthew stopped several times. "Can we rest?" "Of course." They sat on a large stone. Matthew drank some water. John looked at his watch. "We've been walking for almost 3 hours." "Only 3? It feels longer." "Yes." John smiled. "You're doing well." Matthew looked up at the mountain. "Are we close to the top?" "Not yet." "How much longer?" "Maybe 2 hours?" Matthew looked at him in silence. 2 hours? Maybe less." "You said we were close." "I said we were getting closer." Matthew shook his head. "You always do that." "What?" "You make things sound easier." John laughed. "Maybe." They rested for another 10 minutes and started walking again. The wind became stronger as they climbed higher. The trees became smaller, and they could see more of the land below them. Matthew stopped and looked back. "Dad, look!" John turned around. Far below them, they could see the road where they had left the car. The forest looked like a huge green carpet. "I can see the road." "Yes." "And our car is somewhere down there." "That's right." Matthew smiled. "We've come a long way." "Yes, we have." They continued. After another hour, the trail became very steep. There were large rocks everywhere. John walked in front of Matthew. "Take your time." Matthew put one hand on a rock and climbed up. "I'm okay." "Good." They climbed slowly. Sometimes John waited for Matthew. Sometimes Matthew waited for John. Neither of them wanted to hurry. At one point, Matthew slipped. His foot moved on a small stone, and he sat down quickly. "Are you okay?" John asked. "Yes." "Did you hurt yourself?" "No, I'm fine." John helped him stand up. "Be careful. The rocks are wet here." "I will." They walked for another 20 minutes. Then, suddenly, Matthew saw something above them. "Dad!" "What?" "I can see the top!" John looked up. There it was. The top of the mountain was only a short distance away. Matthew smiled. "Come on!" He started walking faster. "Slow down," John said. "We still have to get there safely." But Matthew was excited. A few minutes later, he reached the top. He turned around. "Dad, we did it!" John reached the top a moment later. He stood next to his son. For a few seconds, neither of them said anything. The view was incredible. They could see forests, fields, roads, and small houses far below. The river looked like a thin silver line. Other mountains stood in the distance. The sky was blue, and the clouds were moving slowly over the tops of the mountains. Matthew took a deep breath. "This is amazing." John nodded. "Yes." "Was it worth it?" John looked at his son. "Yes, definitely." They sat down on the grass. John took 2 sandwiches from his backpack. Lunch? Matthew smiled. Finally. They ate and looked at the view. After a while, Matthew asked, Dad? Yes? Do you remember the first time we went camping? John thought about it. Yes. You were very small. I don't remember it. You were 4. 4? Yes. What happened? You didn't want to sleep in the tent. Matthew laughed. Why? Because you heard something outside. What was it? A bird. Matthew started laughing. You were scared of a bird? I wasn't scared. You were. I was protecting you. Matthew laughed even more. They talked for a long time. They talked about school, work, family, and the future. Then Matthew looked at his father. Dad? Yes? I'm happy we came here. John looked at him. Me too. I want to remember today. You will. How do you know? Because sometimes you don't remember every word or every place, but you remember how you felt. Matthew was quiet for a moment. I think I'll remember this. John put his hand on his son's shoulder. I will too. They stayed at the top for almost an hour. Then John looked at the sky. We should go. Already? Yes. We have a long way back. Matthew stood up. Okay. They put their backpacks on and started down the mountain. The way down was easier in some places, but it was also dangerous because the rocks were wet. They walked slowly. After some time, Matthew said, Dad? Yes. Next time, can we climb a smaller mountain? John laughed. Sure. Much smaller. Okay. And maybe one with a restaurant at the top. John laughed again. That sounds like a good plan. The sun was getting lower when they reached the forest. The air was warmer now. Birds were singing in the trees. Matthew was tired, but he was happy. They crossed the small wooden bridge again. This time Matthew wasn't afraid. He stopped in the middle and looked down at the river. It looks different now. How? Maybe because we're going home. John smiled. Maybe. They walked on. The last part of the trail seemed very long. Matthew was quiet. John could see that he was tired. Do you need to stop? No. Are you sure? Yes. A few minutes later, Matthew stopped. Okay, maybe I need to stop. John laughed. Come on, 5 minutes. They sat beside the trail. The forest was quiet. Matthew closed his eyes. Dad? Yes? Can we come back here? John looked at him. Of course. Maybe next summer? Maybe. And maybe we can bring Mom? John smiled. Yes, we can bring Mom. Matthew opened his eyes. And maybe we can find that rock again. The meteorite? Yes. John laughed. Of course. After 5 minutes, they stood up and continued walking. Finally, they saw the road, and then they saw their car. Matthew smiled. We're back. Yes. He took off his backpack and put it on the ground. I am tired. So am I. But it was a good day. John looked at his son. Yes, Matthew. It was a very good day. They got into the car. Before John started the engine, Matthew looked out of the window at the mountain. Goodbye, he said quietly. John smiled. See you next time. The car started moving. The mountain slowly disappeared behind the trees. Matthew closed his eyes. He was tired, but he was happy. John drove home in silence. He thought about the day. He thought about the mountain, the river, the long trail and the view from the top. But most of all, he thought about his son. He knew that one day Matthew would grow up. He would have his own work, his own home, and his own life. There would be many busy days. There would be many things to do. But John hoped that Matthew would remember this day. A simple day. A long walk. A mountain. And a father and his son walking together.